Welcome to the Free Cities podcast. My name is Timothy Allen, and this is the official podcast of the Free Cities Foundation. Hello, and welcome to the first episode of the Free Cities podcast in 2023. Happy New Year to you all. I trust you had a good time over the holiday season, and I wish you all the best for the coming year. Today's episode is with a wonderful gentleman by the name of Dusan Matuska. Now, I initially met Dusan in the Czech Republic during the Liberty in Our Lifetime conference, but it wasn't until our paths crossed again in San Salvador that I finally had the chance to sit down with him for an all too brief 1 hour session before he had to fly off to Roatán in Honduras, where he had recently opened a Bitcoin education center in the Free City project of Próspera. In this conversation, we talk about Dusan's decision to move to Próspera and how he sees the future of the project in the face of governmental opposition. We also discuss topics such as anarcho-capitalism, alternatives to democracy, personal carbon taxes, and the importance of freedom of movement, in particular with regards to free city projects and whether or not the freedom to move is even something that is guaranteed to exist in our future. Speaking to Dusan is always a pleasure, and I enjoyed our chat immensely. I only wish we could have talked for longer. Meanwhile, though, it just leaves me to say to you, please sit back, relax, and enjoy my conversation with Dusan Matuska.
Okay, so I'm Dusan. I'm from Slovakia, a Bitcoin educator, and I've been in this space for about 5 years now.
Okay, and the reason why you're very much relevant to this podcast is you're actually moving to what I would call at least one of the better, or one of possibly the best examples of what a free city is or could be, and you're actually moving there. Is that right?
That's true. Like in January, I'm going there with my girlfriend, moving there for at least 6 months, and yeah, it seems we're going to live there for a while.
So let's start at the beginning. I met you in Prague at the Free Cities conference. Let's start with, can you just recount a few of your ideas and experiences from that conference? Because personally, I had an incredible time there, and I was surprised. To be honest, I didn't really know what it was going to be like, but I definitely didn't think it was going to be that good. So do you have any recollections from that conference?
I was also really surprised by attendance, but how many people came to really talk and discuss the free cities. And I really loved what was the diversity of the people, from politicians, libertarians, Bitcoiners, seasteaders, all these kind of people that I was just hearing about them in podcasts. Now they are meeting together and they are just creating the better future, the better governance platform. So that was super, super cool. And we also did the little meetup in Parallel Polis where the Bitcoiners came and we were doing some videos there. So it was also amazing to see how many people like the idea of Bitcoin there. And I was kind of expecting that for people around free cities, the Bitcoin will be not that appealing of idea, but it super connects together. It's just one cannot exist without the other, kind of. So I loved that connection.
Yeah, I that's the realization I had. I think that because obviously I come from the Bitcoin side of the equation, but once I dug a little deeper into the free cities idea, it seems obvious to me that one can't exist without the other. Let's go, and I'm going to butcher the word here. It's Parallel Polis, isn't it? Parallel Polis.
Parallel Polis, that's
right.
True. That's
Can
correct.
you just tell us, so this was my understanding. Parallel Polis is a well, it's like, is it a 3 or 4 story building?
Yeah, 3 stories building.
3-story building in the center of Prague, a beautiful place, which, as far as I know, was one of the first ever kind of Bitcoin centers in the world. Is that right?
That's true. They're operating since 2014, and it was actually the first crypto-only cafeteria in the world. So Parallel Polis doesn't accept any fiat. Anything you can pay only with crypto.
Which is quite incredible. And what was your part in all that? You seem to be pretty heavily involved in it when we were there.
Yeah, so I get to know about the idea in 2017, and I made a visit there and met the founders of the Polis. And basically, with the founders of the Czech Parallel Polis, we founded a Slovak Parallel Polis. So I was one of the co-founders of the Parallel Polis in Bratislava, like a sister organization. So, and just a few words about like what it is, why this weird name, because people are like, is it polis as a, like police, you know? No, it's not like that. It's polis as a city, or in Greek as a village. So the idea comes from Czechoslovakia in the 70s and 80s. And we had a huge oppression at the time, you know, socialism and totalitarianism. And there was a guy with the name of Václav Benda. And he was one of the signature of Chart 77. And he was basically saying, like, we have 3 options or 3 ways how we can change things. First way is to, you know, go into the structures, create a political party, and try to change things from within, which doesn't help at all. The second one is like you go to the streets and you just protest and you scream to your politicians like, let's change things. And the third one, what he said, this is the one that we should aim for, is to create a parallel structure, a parallel education system, a parallel financial system. And this is basically what they were doing in 70s and 80s. So they were teaching kids at home without propaganda from schools, and they were doing these afternoon classes for them. They were propagating parallel news around the people, parallel art. And this was we call it Parallel Polis 0.1. This is how he named it, Parallel Polis. And then the Czech artist community with the Slovak hackers, white hat hackers, they came together and they wanted to revive this idea. So they created this building, they named it Parallel Polis like 2.0. And the main idea of the place is to show people like how technologies, the new technologies like 3D printing and cryptocurrencies can alleviate or like raise the level of individual freedom. So this was the whole idea. And I was super impressed by the mission. And I said, like, I just want to be part of that. So we founded the Slovak Parallel Polis in Bratislava, but we needed to close down due to COVID. But I'm still in a close relationship to them. And anytime when I'm in Prague, I just love to go to Polis and meet the people there. So I was excited to do, during the conference, like a little meetup there.
Obviously, we'll come on to this later, but you have recently just opened a similar building in Próspera, which is one of our favorite free cities. I mean, how did you first hear about the free cities movement, let's say?
I think it was last year. And actually, I first heard about Próspera and then about the free cities initiatives all around the place. But I was drawn to it even like a few years ago when I was watching the documentary or the movie, The Rose Island. I don't know if you know that.
No, Rose Island.
The Rose Island.
Tell me more.
Oh man, it's an amazing story. It's based on a true story from Italy, where a guy decided that he will set up his own country, his own city, his own place outside of territory of Italy. And at the time, I think it was about 12 miles from the coast where the territorial water started. And he set up like an old pier, like a platform on the water. And he started to doing their like parties. And they wanted to do they had a separate flag, and they wanted to create a territory. And he went to a court. I think it was like European court in I don't know in which European city, and he claimed that like this is a sovereign place, and he wanted to have his own flag and territory. And the Italian government was like freaking out because they didn't know what to do. And in the end, they kind of bombed the place. Basically, they came there with the ships, and they were firing bullets and stuff on the place, and they burned it down. And actually, what happened afterwards is after this incident, they raised the territorial waters to 50 or 150 miles from the coast. So, and this is based on true story. Check it out. It's called Rose Island.
Based on a true story.
Yeah, it really happened.
He tried to create his sort of an independent state, and the government just came in and flattened it, basically.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
Okay, well, why don't we drill down on that? Because that's one of the things that in all these discussions and that people are having, and in all the things they're building and doing, that is kind of like an elephant in the room.
Yeah.
I've spoken to a number of people about this. I'm interested to hear your opinion. What is your opinion on the notion that these communities, if you track them into the future, probably are disempowering to a state? I think. I know that at the moment there's no such thing as an independent territory within a country. They're basically following the laws of the country, but creating mainly economic conditions that are different. Mm-hmm. So what's your view on the state just coming in and saying, right, no, stop?
Well, I think it will be happening. It's really tough. Also looking at Próspera, like they need to show also to the Honduras, they can, Próspera can bring a lot of capital, a lot of brain power inside, and they need to show a real case, empirical, this is how we are changing the world, or changing the lives of people on the place. So you need to have time to build it, and you need to have resources until you prove that it makes sense. And during that meantime, then the government might say yeah, we don't like it because whatever, there's a foreign capital coming in and taking our lands, whatever the socialist government says, basically. So it's kind of tough from my point of view to navigate for these communities in between these political and legal hurdles. Over time, I believe, when the concept will be proven right, and it will, and it's being proven right every day, the regular states will become less and less relevant. People will be moving to these zones, and they will be leveraging all the legal setups in these zones, all the businesses and all the capital inside. And I think that the regular states will be slowly drained out from money, and everything is connected, also Bitcoin as a sound money that can be printed out. If we move towards this and people will use it, it drains capital, it drains funds from the state back to the people's hands. So I think over time, it cannot happen during one night, basically. We cannot delete the states from today till tomorrow, right? And I think it will be happening over time, over decades, where the states will be irrelevant. And people will know that, I think I'm living in Honduras, but I don't even think about it anymore because I don't interact with Honduras government anymore, right? I interact with regions, with various platforms and startup cities and all these kind of things, which will be fragmented, which will be more decentralized, and you can choose where to go. People will be the local government or the local cities will be treating you much better than the government. So I think this is how I see the trend going, and it just needs some time to prove itself that it really makes sense. So
there's in your decision to move to Próspera, there's no thought of that in your mind, that maybe you'll be building something that will be stopped in its tracks?
Well, I was thinking about it, and I was also weighing these risks, but it's so much worse than any risk involved. I really want to help out the whole project. I really want to contribute my part, being the Bitcoin educator and helping people understand and use Bitcoin. And if something happens, and if they would need to close down, which I really doubt, we just figure out where to do it next and where to educate people, or we stay there and just fight as well. I'm really, really positive about what's happening there. Próspera in general has a super strong legal protection. Currently, they have 50 years of freedom from Honduras, which basically like there is still some tension, but it's not like the whole government hates them. It's like there are people inside the structures, inside administrative, that already see a huge benefit to what Próspera is doing. So again, I think it just needs time to prove that we are here to help people and not to kind of take your money, take your land, and take your resources.
I mean, the political problem that I've seen in talking to people out there is a problem that shows the faults in this current system we live in as much as Próspera was, the idea of the ZAs was implemented during one government. Mm-hmm. And then a few years later, the government changed, and the new government are now against them. Yeah. So it's very hard to. Well, fortunately, like you said, they seem to have created about 50 years worth of legal safeguards on top of it. But it does actually show the fallacies of the kind of current system that you can put all your effort into something, and then you can be voted against. Often by a minority. Mm-hmm. It's not that it's even like more than 50% of people.
Not at all.
Right?
Not at all.
And I think that's also during our time at the conference in Prague. I asked everyone what their view of democracy was, and all the speakers had roughly the same idea, which was democracy is a tricky thing. It doesn't really work. It's mob rule. And, most people, or a large number of people, become disenfranchised by democracy. Mm-hmm. Is that your view as well?
Definitely. And I remember the question, and I was saying basically the same thing, that I believe that there is definitely a better solution to how people interact with each other without kind of making the violence an okay thing. Because in democracy, where one party decides for the other, it's like there still needs to be violence to make it happen. And I realized it like a few weeks ago when we were on a trip in the woods with my friends, with like 12 people on a cottage, inside of a cottage, and we were deciding, where to go to eat, what will the program, where we will go to for a hike. And just deciding in this small group of people and doing it democratically so that we can agree like where the group will go, it was so frustrating. And people are like, I will go with you, but I hate it. Or I will go to eat there, but I don't want to eat there, And I was like, what if we just separate and we just do whatever we want? And we like one group will go that way and whoever wants to follow just goes. And for me, it was like, reminding myself like this is exactly why democracy is a wrong thing, and we think that it's correct, but we don't see behind the curtain of there is so much violence needed to make it work, and it's not voluntaristic, and we are kind of convinced that this is the best we can do and we cannot have something better. So I definitely believe there is something better, and it has to do something with voluntarist approach, non-aggression principle, and going more into anarcho-capitalist style of organization than like to centralized style.
Do you think that the current iteration of democracy that we see here in our everyday lives, do you think it has served a good purpose? Do you think there was a time and a place for it? How can it be that there are a growing number of people that think that actually it doesn't work?
I think I'm not a historian, I would say, but I think there was a place, and democracy replacing dictatorships or communist and socialist governments is a step to a better direction, or it's in a good direction. What's happening in a couple of last years, since the technologies are emerging so fast, and what's happening is like we are kind of getting slowly into this more dystopian democracy where the big brother state has a lot of data on us, and it was proven many times the government can misuse the data. They can misuse, the media, and they can control majority of what people think. So this is why I see that it's not going in a good direction if we centralize a lot of power over these structures into just few hands. And that's why I would love to see more decentralization in governance models as well, because otherwise it's the same as, since I'm from the Bitcoin space, when there is a centralized exchange which requires all the KYC process and all the people needs to put all their personal data inside, and then the exchange goes bankrupt or it gets hacked, all the data are flying around the internet. Like, it's not, of course the hackers did the bad thing, but first of all, the government made the exchange to collect all the data. Why? Because they thought it will help prevent crime? No. It just makes everybody worse because the data are right now misused all around the internet. And I think this is what's happening also with governance structures, gathering so much data that can be misused so easily. And China is showing us how to do that, basically.
So what do you say then to people that would say that collecting data on people and on their transactions and on what they're doing is important for the safety of the collective?
The data shows it's wrong. And there was a study done on AML policies.
Define AML.
Anti-money laundering.
Anti-money laundering.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the percentage of money that was saved compared to how much money was used for the whole structure was 0.1%. So imagine you put like $1,000 into that and you just save $1 of money. So
sorry, against money laundering, are you saying? So
yes.
For every $1,000, AML procedure discovers $1 of money. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So imagine a business that's kind of like losing money. Like you're putting $1,000 inside and you're getting out $1 of that. This is what's wrong. Like this is what's happening with these regulations. They are not effective at all. And we are trying to, people are trying to convince us, if you go over the legacy system into the banking system, you're protected. There are no frauds at all. But the biggest frauds are basically happening inside of the legacy system. There was one bank in the Denmark called Danske Bank, which basically laundered $250 billion of money over the legacy system, which should be super protected. So it doesn't work at all. And if you look at data on the leaks and where the trace of these big money, everything goes over the legacy system. So it simply doesn't work.
So okay, I'm gonna play devil's advocate again then. Even if we find $1 worth of one bad dollar for every 1,000 we spend, isn't that still good?
You're spending $1,000 that could be spent for the people could spend on what they really want, and now you need to extract and extort these $1,000 from people from their wealth and put it into these procedures that doesn't work. So again, if it would be voluntary by people, if they would say, okay, I want to fight AML, I want to fight anti-money laundering, and they will voluntarily put money inside. Of course, that's a free market. Let's do it, and let's make people do the crowdfunding and fight this thing. And they would soon realize oh, this is such a waste of money because it simply doesn't work. So everything because we can say the same thing about taxes, about whatever. If we extort billions from people by force and we put it into something that we make, I don't know, one person educated or 1,000 person educated, isn't it a good thing? I don't think so, because in the first place you needed to extort the money out. If we do it by crowdfunding, if we do it by voluntarist approach, that's where it makes sense, because people decide with their own money where to vote, where to put their money. And I think this is the system that I would like to see, and this is the system I'm supporting.
Here's a thought experiment then. Say that at some point in the future we have many little satellites of free economic regions, free cities, and they're all implementing their own rules and regulations. Isn't it true that you would then get some places which would be hotbeds of crime and money laundering? And is that something that would happen? I'm just thinking it through. Sure, I'm going to choose to go to the place where I feel everything's fair and right and good. But I don't think you ever get rid of criminal activity. It's part of human nature. There's a percentage of people that will always adopt that kind of tactic. So do you think, is that a future where there are these places, these kind of criminal free cities or something? Is that something that could happen?
Well, in a free world, I think that might happen. But the thing is, like, who would like to live there in the first place, right? Because if people are free to move and they are not kind of rooted inside of that place, and if there's a huge criminality, something's gonna happen. It's not like there is criminality and it stays that way. Either the city, if the city wants to keep the people inside, they will deal with that somehow because they know that people will be going out. And if they want to keep this criminal atmosphere there, well, okay. But it's like I don't see this as a viable long-term thing for people. And if anybody can decide where to live, who would like to live in these kind of places?
I suppose, just taking that thought further, I think probably those places would be white-collar criminal hangouts. And they'd probably be very nice. They'd be very luxurious and very closed with large walls around them.
Yeah, that might also happen. Like, it's a nice thought experiment. Like, the more I'm thinking about freedom and like the anarcho-capitalistic societies, I need to kind of run into arguments in my head where I don't agree with the way of living. I don't agree with some of the values, but I'm still getting underneath, and the value of people interacting with each other on a free basis, it's more important for me than if somebody decides to take drugs or if there's some criminal activity, because it's also can be solved through different mechanics of a free market, like reputation systems and arbitration centers and the private security companies. So it's super hard to extract one topic of criminality from the whole system that kind of works. Like it's interconnected so much that you cannot just extract one thing and say like, oh, how would this thing work in crypto or in anarcho-capitalistic society? You cannot tell that because it's like programming the free market, which you cannot do. You cannot predict what would happen. But I'm a huge believer in free market, and so far everything shows that if we had free market without centralistic forces, free market solved itself.
Okay, then one thing I picked up on what you've just been saying is that this system requires the free movement. It needs the ability to be able to vote with your feet.
Yeah.
Obviously, that is something that is a bit of a hot topic at the moment. I mean, this time last year, many people around the world were forced to stay in their own houses. So I want to ask you about free movement, and there's two things that concern me. One is lockdown. Even personal carbon tax, all this kind of stuff. Yeah. And the other one is free movement's easy when you're sort of a single person with no responsibilities. And I know this from first experience because I have a young family, and we did go on a citadel hunt. I spent a year with my family traveling around Central America.
Nice.
During this time of the pandemic when we were noticing, wow, this is pretty serious. And in the end, with a family, it's a much tougher decision to say, okay, let's just settle on this tropical island in Honduras. It's not as easy. So there's the two elements there to free movement that must be concerning people. What's your view on those? Start with the idea that we may not even have free movement in the future.
Yeah, I read, I think yesterday on Twitter, there was something related to like G20. There was a G20 meeting, and they decided that there should be like permanent or like mandatory vaccine passports, and it's like, oh my God, it's not going in a good direction. So it's hard to look at that and have a lot of positivity and optimism. What I'm, let's say, optimistic about is that there is, how I see that is that there is some kind of level where people can be pushed, and under that level there is like it's like in trading, you have like a price floor, right? So under that, nobody wants to sell. So there's like, it's a resistance, and it goes up with the price. I feel that there is something with like how far people will be pushed and are willing to be pushed. And under that, like they say, like not at all. And they're going to go to streets. They're going to do revolution. They're going to find different ways to go around that. And so this is, I'm a believer in that. Even if the governments will be getting there, like there is some kind of level where people will just say like no more. And everybody has, on a personal level, has different, the bar is on a different, height, I would say. Somebody already said like, I will not get vaxxed, and I will just move out of the country and whatever. Some people are like complying, but they will not comply till the end. So I'm thinking about like, even if the pressure to not travel around will be bigger and bigger, like somewhere it needs to break where people just like not at all, and they will leave or they will just go away. And on the level of the family, since I'm not married yet and I don't have kids, so it's for me hard to say that. But I definitely agree with you that it's much harder with a family. It's much more costly. It's more expensive. It's more logistically heavy to do that. And again, it just, in my mind, it just creates the level, or it just puts your pressure point or breaking point a little bit lower. And when the government presses here, then you say like, okay, I'm just taking my whole family and we are going away. Right.
And I have a perfect example of what you're talking about here, because yesterday I spent the day with some friends of ours that we met while we were in El Salvador. Mm-hmm. I brought my family here for 6 weeks. And they are Canadians with 3 young kids, almost identical ages to mine, who are now applying for residency here, simply because the wife was a nurse. Mm-hmm. She decided she didn't want to take the vaccine, and she was sacked for it. And they left. They sold up. They actually voted with their feet. Mm-hmm. To the point where they went back for a wedding a few months ago and were fined just over, I think, $12,000 entering the country, refusing to take a PCR test coming in.
No way.
Because, and this is what I've noticed about people who make a stand. It doesn't matter whether you think the vaccination was a good or bad. Mm-hmm. If you decided you didn't want to take it, which many people did, and then you were being coerced and forced to, that's when people started to stand up.
Yeah.
Not for the actual vaccine itself, because, I've heard compelling arguments both ways for the vaccination. I haven't heard compelling arguments for forced vaccination both ways, though, and sacking people and not allowing them to travel on public transport, which was the case in Canada, of all places. So, I'm very nervous about that myself. Talking of the G20 as well, I saw something as well, which was someone, I don't know who it was, but they had a lot of World Economic Forum logos behind them, talking about the personal carbon tax in a very matter-of-fact way. And that's my worst fear, I think, because the carbon tax idea is very compelling if you are the kind of person who wants to, inverted commas, save the planet. Yeah. I think it's a very strong leverage point for people, because they think, wow, save the planet. And then they just stop there. And, the current the level of technological advancement we have in the world has reached that point where it could implement this thing.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Is that something you think about?
I don't think about it a lot, in a sense that kind of preparing on that, or what I do is like right now moving to Próspera, trying to find a place which will be more safer or more free to live. And yeah, wherever it happens, I think it might happen in EU the first, because that's kind of really positioned well for this kind of stuff. And I don't want to be living there when it happens, and it really might happen. So what I want to do to contribute not to happen is like educating people like what it is and why it's wrong, and opening their eyes with Bitcoin, with freedom, with all these topics. I don't want to go to do a protest or to go into the politics and change it from within. What I can do is show why it's wrong. I don't think I personally can stop that agenda, and everything seems that it's going that direction, and it's a huge mess if it happens. It's like, and many people are like super compliant with, as you said, like, because saving the planet is like the highest goals for them, and like the lowest carbon tax or the lowest carbon footprint is that when you die, basically. So you can push it so much that some people, some extremists, even they commit suicide, whatever, because they say, let's save the planet. And this is so messed up. So I know some people that already say, like, I don't want to bring kids to this world, I don't want to create more footprint or like bring them here. I was like, that's so sad, man. That's so sad when I'm listening to them. So as soon as possible, I think we need to show that you can live differently, that this is wrong, thinking this way, and we need to show compelling, real examples of how you can do it. And when we are speaking about the movement, the freedom to move, what comes together with that is like you need to have your wealth movable as well. And that's where Bitcoin comes in place as a piece of puzzle for you to really make your personal freedom higher, to move with your family anywhere, because you have your wealth in 12 words in your head. So and this carbon footprint is like, it's one of the worst things that might happen.
Unfortunately, I'm with you. I think it's I suppose I would never say inevitable, but it does appear to be so, because it's so easy to implement.
Yeah.
And it makes the steps towards something like a personal carbon tax are very simple. It's not a convoluted journey for many people.
And some banks are already doing that, I think. I saw some statistics, I think it was from bank applications, based on what you're buying, like what's your score in carbon, like how much carbon did you produce or whatever this thing. And again, that's just one simple step to, implement some policy behind it. Or you can just buy this amount of meat per week. Because if we're going to have CBDCs, or when we're going to have CBDCs, and you connect these things together, then you cannot buy with your digital money from the bank, you cannot buy the meat because you overexceeded the amount for a week. And this is like Black Mirror dystopia.
Yes.
If you saw the series. So yeah, it's crazy. And like Bitcoin kind of gives me hope in all this mess where like when I go to the conferences like this, adopting Bitcoin or wherever around the world, I see people that like they give a fuck. They really want to change things, and they will not be oppressed. And their threshold, their breaking point was already like breached. Yeah. And they are doing the things to really, for themselves, not to be oppressed, and teaching people how to do it as well. So this kind of gives me the orange light hope in all this mess. Like we finally have a tool that cannot be stopped like this. And with the tool, we can open up a lot of people's eyes to not only Bitcoin, not only finance in general, but to more broader reach, like whatever we're speaking right now.
And something I suppose I have learned through being in the Bitcoin movement is that of what protest actually is. I think in the same way that my opinion on many things has changed over the last few years. The idea that protesting is something you do to the people in charge, which now seems like a ridiculous idea to me.
Yeah,
and it's one thing I was a journalist in London for 7 years, and I covered protests, big ones, violent ones, big, and they were, when you're in the middle of it, you think, wow, something's really happening here. I remember there was a movement called Reclaim the Streets, which was a huge movement. And one time I was, the people stormed the stock exchange in London and were fighting traders on escalators going up there, pieces of paper flying everywhere and stuff, right? And when you're there, this is me in my sort of early 30s, thinking, my God, the world's changing, And then the next day, the newspaper I worked for sent me down the next morning to sort of photograph what was left,
Mm-hmm.
and it was already cleared up. You know, even
Like nothing happened.
Yeah, the graffiti was already being rubbed off the walls. You know, within 48 hours, there was no sign of this thing.
Oh.
But it never occurred to me to think that a protest doesn't work if you're protesting to the people that make the rules, which is what I love about doing a deep dive on Bitcoin. You realize that something like Bitcoin is a genuine protest,
A peaceful protest. Yeah.
Well, it's not even it's not even anything. It's just you're by adopting a parallel reality, you're making a protest against the reality which you don't agree with.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the beautiful thing about it. I many times use a slide on my presentations, and when I'm speaking in the end of presentation about Bitcoin and how is it the peaceful protest, and I use a slide of a guy putting like a flower to a guns on a, like when there was a police with the guns, he's like was putting like a flower inside of that, and this kind of gives me the analogy of just fighting the system with, like, not fighting violently, but just defunding the system, or like going in a parallel way without, like, you start to ignore that. You start like, okay, that was the legacy system, and I want to live in a different world. So you're kind of like, with your energy, with your actions, you're creating this new world and not putting energy into even fighting the old one. So this is what, like, it's a huge game changer for me, and seeing that in practice and how it works, how it really works every day, every year, more and more people getting in, and more these institutions are afraid, to lose power, without anybody, going to the street and fighting them on the streets with that, but just stacking sets. This kind of gives me like hope, like this is the correct way.
One of the problems with the human condition, I think, let's say, is that you can be in a room full of amazing people discussing ways to change the world. And if there's one guy in the room shouting his head off about something else, everyone gets distracted and starts listening to that guy, even if they've got the worst ideas. And I feel a little bit like that about the current system. The current system is loud and brash, and it keeps you sucked in, and with force and violence and all these things. And you historically you could look back and say, yeah, many peaceful protests didn't work. I suppose the hope here is that the technology of Bitcoin didn't exist before, and I think a lot of people don't fully acknowledge how important that sovereign money is in this whole predicament we find ourselves in.
Like for humanity in general, like every time it was, and it's super important. Yeah, definitely.
Well, I mean, if you're in charge of the money printer, you can do anything. You can invade Iraq without anyone's permission. You can quell or quash any uprising you wish. I think it's a super important part of this equation. So let's talk a little bit about what you're doing on Roatán in Próspera.
So what we started there is a Bitcoin education center. I got really inspired by Parallel Polis in Prague, and what we are doing in Bratislava for a couple of years. And I was really thinking about like starting this kind of place again somewhere in Central America, but I had like no idea where. And I randomly learned about Roatán last year. I had no idea it exists. I had no idea it's here in Caribbean. So what happened? My friend told me about it, and he was sending me pictures of like beautiful beaches and places. I was like, okay, I need to go and see. And he told me like the second largest community on the islands are Czech, which we used to be friends, like not friends, but like brothers, Czech and Slovakia.
Why is that? That's a bit unusual. It's the second largest community, outside of the local community?
Outside of like the first largest expat community is Americans, and the second one is Czechs.
Why is that?
Yeah, that's so weird. And the reason for this is like there used to be a Czech brewery on the island. So there was one guy from Czech Republic. He was an artist in New York, and he got into communication with the local government and made a deal that he will start a brewery there because the Honduras wanted to have like a Czech beer. he wanted to do something on the island. So the Czech brewery came out. It was a beautiful building, really lovely. It still exists on the island of Roatán, but it's kind of breaking down a little bit. And the brewery was running for a couple of years, and then Heineken came and they pushed down the prices. So the brewery needed to go out, went out of business. But the Czech guys stayed there, and they started to do development. They started to build houses because they were really good at it. And slowly over time, that there exists right now the Czech village. So there's dozens of houses, Czech village, with a Czech pub where every other week there's a guy playing banjo or playing guitar, singing Czech songs. It's so random. It's so beautiful. So when I heard this, I was like, I need to go and check that out. And at the time, I had no idea about Próspera. So I came to the island. They were just going west and east and enjoying the beauty, and the island is beautiful. And then at the time, there was a Próspera summit going on. I had no idea what it is. So I opened the website of Próspera, and my first impression was oh, this is some kind of crypto scammy thing, because in Caribbean you have a bunch of these Satoshi islands that kind of pretend to change the world and stuff. So I was really skeptical, but I said okay, the summit is happening 1st of April, I'm there, so I will just go and see that. So I went, and I was super surprised by people being there and buildings being built around, and that it wasn't only vision on a paper, but it was really happening. So I heard the presentations. I was super excited. We had the opportunity as well to present our ideas which we would like to develop on the island. So I presented our idea of the Bitcoin Education Center, and Eric Briman was sitting in front. At the time I had no idea who he is. So he told me Dusan, I like the idea. So what are you doing afternoon? I was I'm going to snorkel with my girlfriend. He's okay, before you go snorkel with your girlfriend, I will take you to a building. And if you like the building, it can be ready for you from July. You can build your center here. I was oh my God, that sounds amazing. And the building is the top view of the whole island. It's beautiful. And you've been there.
It's astonishing.
It's astonishing building. It's astonishing view. And I came there. We spoke with Eric about libertarian ideas for an hour, about objectivism, about Ayn Rand, Atlas Shrugged, and all these ideas that I love, and I really am connected to that, and that's my values. And he gave me this opportunity, so I said wow, that's amazing. So let's do it here. And everything just came together. The people around Próspera, the vision of Próspera as free city, and Central America as a nice hub for Bitcoin projects. The island, as we were searching with my girlfriend a place where to spend our next maybe years. So everything came together, and it was let's do it here. So we founded that. It's called METH Academy, the Bitcoin Center of Roatán. And what we do there, we are really having a place where people can come and learn about Bitcoin. Also on a practical level, to buy it in the ATM, set up a wallet, pay with it for their coffee, and get the whole process into their hands and really see that it's working, and it's working really well. We're doing academies. We're helping businesses to accept Bitcoin on the island. So we're really aiming to make Roatán the Bitcoin island of Caribbean with our activities. And also inside of Próspera, we are helping businesses as well as people to kind of get on the rails of Bitcoin. So because in Próspera you don't have any capital gains on Bitcoin. Bitcoin is de facto legal tender there. Basically there's no legal tender in Próspera per se, but so you can pay your taxes with Bitcoin as well. So, and for people to coming in and they're interested, we want to give them tools to really do it practically, and know-how as well on security levels, on how to avoid scams and all these kind of things. So this is our idea behind, and we are 2 months into it, and having an opening party soon, tomorrow basically. So yeah, everything is just starting, and we are putting a lot of energy into it, and I'm super excited about where it can go.
I'll just, for people listening, I'll describe the place, because Google it. You might be able to find some pictures of it. It's not that well known about yet, is it? Yeah. But it's like Dusan said, it's on a hill. and it's got a beautiful balcony all the way around with views over to the sea on both sides. It's kind of like between, it's in the middle of the island, you can see both coasts.
Yeah, exactly.
Inside, it's like cathedral height ceilings with a beautiful, it's just a beautiful place to work. And then there's another level upstairs you can go to where there is a kind of roof terrace with must be about a 300-degree view all the way around of the whole of the coast, the Caribbean. I mean, I've been to a few of the Bitcoin, what do you call them? Physical nodes of the network.
Citadels.
The Citadel, yeah. Like, and up until this point, I think Bitcoin Park in Nashville was my favorite. But this place is definitely a high contender because Bitcoin Park doesn't have a view. It's bigger and it's got more facilities, but it doesn't have a view.
I need to go and check that out. It sounds really
Bitcoin Park. Oh, it's phenomenal, mate. Man. It's but I mean the theory is the same. It's just happening on a grander scale. It's in Nashville. It's now the hub of all the Bitcoin things going on in Nashville. But it was a former. Belonged to a country and western band. It's two big old colonial houses next to each other, which meant they had a recording studio in there. They had there's podcasts coming out of there. There was films like film editing suites, and it's incredible. I spent 6 weeks in Nashville this year, and went to meetups there. And also because it's America, when they have a meetup, it's like a Bitcoin conference. You get very high value people just speaking, you know, like it's one of the big centers in America. So as a result, that's where everyone goes. And I think you could do the same thing here, I suppose.
That's what we are planning to do, like really be for Central America, one of the places, one of the nodes where we're gonna do the conferences and workshops and where the community can meet. And that's our goal, to have a place to like a basement for people to come to work, to co-work there, have a good coffee, have a good food there. So, and meet new Bitcoiners, meet fellow Bitcoiners. So that's our goal to really, that's what we want to do from the academy.
So talk a little bit about what's happening in the rest of Próspera, because I was very excited to see what's going on there. And one of the things about having a Bitcoin center is you need people to attend it. And I think it's fair to say Próspera currently has a problem in places to stay in Próspera itself. Everything's full.
Yeah.
The part of the new side of Próspera that they're building that did have accommodation, they had to relinquish that for businesses because there were so many businesses that wanted to come. And now they're building the tower, this 14-story tower with like, I don't know how many places to stay. There's going to be a lot already. And then there's going to be more and more and more. So what was your experience looking around Próspera?
So we're currently living inside of Próspera. We rented a villa there in Pristine Bay in the resort that the Próspera bought. But as you say, like there's not so many places where you can choose from. Like you can go to the villas, or you can wait for the Dune residents to finish. So currently there's like a couple of dozens people like really living there and working inside of Próspera. In the beta building, there's about 50, 60 people working there in the whole building, in the co-working space. And yeah, so related to accommodation, it's being developed. Like Próspera is right now open to developers to buy lands inside of the Pristine Bay or on the Próspera side, and they can build up the residential area as well. So there are already some talks with some larger companies to do that. But yeah, you basically need to build both sides. Like you need to build the business side, so because people will not go there if you don't have nothing to do there, right? So first of all, you need to have like a nice resort, place to stay, place to eat, and then you can build residential, and then like you need to grow both sides, or both, you need to balance it out, right? So when right now the first tower of Dune residence will be finished and people can get in, that creates a lot of good incentive for new businesses to come in, because they already have customers, so more restaurants, more groceries, and facilities where people can really spend time. So it's everything. It's quite still new in a way that it's being developed, but it's going super fast. I was there first time in March this year, and the beta building was like not even there. There was just like some groundworks being done, and right now it's almost finished. The first
I think
tower.
It is finished.
Yeah, I think
as far as I'm concerned,
they put the top level, I think, a few days ago, and right now they will be like putting things inside. So yeah, it's going so fast, and also there's like a circular factory next to the beta building being built, which is also going quite fast. So a lot of work on the spot is being done there, and I'm super positive on that.
What I loved about the factory they're building there, what is it called?
Circular factory.
The circular factory, is that they're going to install robots in there that are going to print their own building materials.
That's true.
If that isn't the future, I don't know what is. It's like, that's very futuristic.
It's super futuristic. And I heard that there are like 3 or 4 of these robotic arms in Central America and Mexico, and two of them are in Próspera, and 1 or 2 of them are in Mexico. So there's none other ones. And like the arms should be like building materials for this, like the organic looking or materials on buildings from the local sources, local resources, and it will be done in a way that it will be behind like a glass wall, and in front there will be like a pub or like a cafeteria, so you can enjoy your coffee while watching how your house is being built.
Yeah,
and this making us.
There was some astonishingly interesting projects there. Another one that I spoke to the guys there about was a building which would be a sort of framework building that you can change the layout of the building inside very easily. Mm-hmm. So you could move into a place, or business could move in, but you could rearrange the layout of the place. Like, they're these kind of, I think it was I think this is going to be 3D printed. But kind of walls, movable. I don't know. To be honest, when I was there, I was listening to all these ideas, thinking, as I thought when I first heard about Próspera, I was like, is this just some guy or girl creating an idea and sort of like, like developing a city in their mind that isn't actually going to exist?
Yeah.
But it appears that it is. It really is, and I agree. There's going to be you're going to be able to drink a coffee whilst watching a robot 3D print building materials. Yeah. I mean, I that was a new one to me. On a tropical island in Honduras as well.
Yes, you would
it's
never
not
expect
in Dubai, in the middle of Dubai or somewhere like that.
Yeah. You would never expect that. That's true. And Próspera is experimenting with like a drone delivery systems, personal like drone vehicles. So a bunch of really, really cool and futuristic stuff is already, like companies are coming and testing things inside of Próspera. So I'm really bullish on like, this is really a place where I would like to be and like interact with people there and just watch what's happening. We used to have, or we had a health tech summit there, and really companies.
Sorry, what was that? Health summit.
Health summit.
Oh, right.
Health tech summit. So there were biotech companies coming inside of Próspera and presenting what they're doing with like gene therapy and like reverse gene therapy and all this stuff, and they are setting up their like companies inside of Próspera right now. And when I was speaking to these guys, what they want to do inside, I was blown away by the level of research that they already done in US, but they're kind of blocked by all the regulation, and it takes so much time just to comply or like fight the bureaucracy, and they can do it much faster inside of Próspera. So this was for me really, really fascinating to see. So it's not only on the construction level, but on a financial level with Bitcoin innovation, with health tech innovation. So yeah, so many various industries are like flocking in and experimenting how to really benefit of the free governance model.
And that's the important word here, the free governance model, I think, because there are undoubtedly people who will listen to this and go, yeah, that's not for me. It's not really what I want to do.
Yeah.
And that's the point. You know, we all hope one day there will be something you want to do. But unless the opportunity is there to try it, you'll never know.
Exactly. And the beauty is that you can decide to go in, or you don't need to. Nobody forces you to. You need to also, when you're entering Próspera as a e-resident, you need to sign the contract to opt in. Also, when the Pristine Bay was bought, like there were some of the houses were already privately owned, and they didn't become immediately like part of Próspera. They can kind of opt in, and they can stay in Honduras legislation, or they can opt into Próspera. So as you said, it's about like, it doesn't need to be for everybody. People can decide to move in, or they can create their own structures somewhere else. But it's about like creating competition on the governance level. This is what I think it's super important, because if we eliminate competition, we are eliminating innovation. We are kind of eliminating freedom a lot, making prices higher, effectivity lower, quality lower. So also in the governance level, we need to have competition. This is, for me, super important.
Do you think many people around the world care about this as we do?
Yes, and I was convinced by that in Prague on the conference, and people from around the world, and just doing their work around the world as well, inspiring from each other. So there is a lot of people already concerned, working on that, and again, I'm really, really bullish on that, and I want to just take some time in a couple of years to just travel all around these economic zones and just see what people are building in their own communities and how they are interacting with each other. So yeah, more and more people are like really interested in, and I think COVID accelerated that and made people think about, okay, should I live where I live right now, or do I want to live at this place with this kind of governance model, or I can look somewhere else, or I can help to build something else. So I think that was an accelerator to make sure that people really care about new governance models.
My final question now. I know you're in 20 minutes. You've got to go to the airport to fly to Próspera. Is that right? Yeah. I should mention we're actually in El Salvador at the moment, which there are direct flights to Próspera from El Salvador.
Exactly.
And I hear they're starting direct flights from Europe to Roatán, the island.
Yes, yeah, that's true. It's not starting yet. It should be done next year, but we will see, because they need to prolong the airport so that the larger flights, the larger airplanes can go from Frankfurt or Madrid. So it should be done next year, but what I heard is like it's being discussed for a year or two already. So we will see. But if that happens, the connection from EU or from Europe is amazing.
Currently, many flights from America.
Yeah,
Miami,
from America, from Canada. Yeah.
Okay, so my last question is this, and this is a question we ask all our guests on the show. No wrong or right answer. I want you to imagine you have a sabbatical of 1 year. Now, during that sabbatical, you have your expenses are covered. You don't have to worry about money. You don't have to worry about where you go, what you do. It's all paid for. What do you do?
What do I do? I travel around the world and educate people about Bitcoin. That's what I feel that I just love doing, and I find any opportunity I can to do it without, need to gather money from that. So yeah, I would just travel and meet the communities, meet different Bitcoiners, and just spread the word, spread the Satoshi's word. That's what I would do.
How can you convince someone who doesn't understand Bitcoin as to why you would be prepared to work for nothing to spread the word of Bitcoin?
How I would convince them to work for that, or
no? How would you convince them? How would you convince them to understand that there are people all around the world prepared to work for nothing to spread the word of this thing?
Like once you got the values, or once you got the mission behind, and once you get the idea of we need to have a sound money, and how much benefit it can bring to society. You just don't want to do anything else. You just want to work on the mission of separating money and state, And that's the mission of Bitcoin.
Fantastic. And I think it's a wonderful mission. So thanks for doing what you do, and thanks for coming on the podcast, Dusan. It's very great to see you again.
Thank you, Tim.
I will certainly see you in Próspera again. We've got plans to come over again and have another look round.
Yeah, come anytime, man. I would love to see you there.